This podcast is for educational purposes only, does not constitute legal advice, and does not create an attorney-client relationship. If you need legal assistance about a legal problem, contact an attorney.
Well, good afternoon, Mr. Forrester. Thank you again for being with us. We are very excited to talk to you today. I know Mr. Bollier and you used to work at the Texas Appraiser Licensing and Certification Board together. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and your role at TALCB?
Sure. Again, my name is Robin Forrester. I'm a certified residential appraiser. I'm also an AQB certified USPAP instructor. My appraisal career started back in 1982, before even licensing. All you had to have at that time was just a real estate sales license, and then you were considered an appraiser. I started appraising, going out and looking at houses, like 3 weeks after I got my license as a real estate agent. So I didn't really know what I was doing. Fortunately, I was working for a company that had some people that could at least point me in the right direction and show me the right end of the tape to use to measure a house. I was at that company for about 6 years before I went to another company. Then I actually, from 98 to 2010, I had my own appraisal company. And then in 2010, Troy was one of the people who hired me to come on at the state as a regulator. So that's kind of my background. I got my AQB certified USPAP instructor certification in 2018. I'm a retired member of the Appraisal Institute. I held 2 designations with them, the SRA designation and the AIRRS designation, which is a review designation. My entire career has been spent in appraising houses, real property. I don't have any experience in the commercial realm whatsoever. So that's kind of a little background about what I've been up to for the past 44 years.
And Robin, when did you end up retiring? I know you were an investigator for roughly about 11, 12 years. When did you retire from the state?
Yeah, my start date with the state was September of 2010, and then my end date was end of August of 21. So almost 12 years.
And what are you doing today?
Today I'm retired. Although I do consulting work for mostly through word of mouth of people that have recently gotten a complaint. I consult with them, and I'm sure we'll be talking more about that. But just kind of talking to them off the ledge, because your first reaction to getting a complaint is, oh no, I'm they're going to kick me out of the business. Well, that's probably 99% or 99.9% not true. So I'm sure we'll be talking more about that. But that's what I'm doing now, is expert stuff and consulting.
Your role as an investigator, what were some of your duties?
When I started with the board, they were very much into enforcement. They had no issues in accepting and promoting harsh disciplines when needed.
Mm-hmm.
They did not have an issue with that. They have, I don't know if they still do or not, but they had investigator trainings. And I went to 3 different investigator trainings, levels 1, 2, and 3. They taught us that enforcement needed to happen. You needed strong enforcement to protect the consumers out there. And that's what this is all about, is protecting the consumer. I was also very lucky to be in the same office with a gentleman who had been around enforcement, well, since the agency had started back in the, I believe, the late 1990s, who was kind enough to take me on as a, I guess, as a trainee, if nothing else, and mentored me through the process. So I was very lucky in that regard. And then in 2014, the Appraisal Institute came out with a class called Review Theory Residential. I went to Orlando to take that class. It was a 2-day class, instructed by a gentleman who's an incredible instructor. And the light kind of came on for me, like, oh, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be looking for when I'm reviewing somebody's work. It all kind of came together at that point. And that made me want to work that much harder to become an expert in review and in USPAP, because that is one of that's what the agency is charged ultimately with enforcing, is USPAP. So it never did quite make sense to me, like, okay, well, I'm an investigator and I'm supposed to be investigating all these complaints for compliance with USPAP, but I'm not an expert in USPAP.
Yeah.
And I need to fix that. And so I did. And that's why I got my USPAP certificate.
I remember many funny conversations when we were preparing for hearings, and I would ask Robin questions about that, whether or not he was an expert, because that's a common discussion that lawyers will have. And he struggled with that at first, and he kept saying, no, I'm not really an expert because I haven't taken all these advanced classes. And I had to say, Robin, you're an expert. You're okay. But Robin was always very interested in learning more and getting better educated. And he, that really culminated in 2018 when he got his AQB certified USPAP instructor designation. And of course, then he got the residential review designation as well. That really added a lot of credit and credibility to, when he had to testify in court.
Totally. And USPAP is the standards that all appraisers are held to, correct?
That's correct. It's a national standard, yes.
The Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. And they're, like we were talking about earlier, Simone, they're promulgated by the Appraisal Foundation because they are the entity charged by Congress with creating these standards. And then under federal law, they get enforced by all the different jurisdictions, all the state appraiser boards. So it's a little bit unusual, but it is a nationwide standard that every state, every jurisdiction is enforcing.
How does this process work? What is it, if I was an aspiring appraiser, what are some of the things that I need to make sure that I have done before I can be licensed?
So if a person wants to enter the appraisal profession, there's a couple of steps that you've got to go through. First of all, you've got to have the education. I don't know if a college degree is still required. Troy might know the answer to that. But when I started, it was. So you have to have the education. There's a certain number of hours that you have to have. One portion of the TALCB deals strictly with education. They have all the courses that you can take, and get that done. I don't know how many hours it is to become licensed and then certified. I used to know that, but then you have to have the experience. You have to actually go out with your sponsor, your supervisor, and learn how to appraise, learn how to measure a house, learn how to drive the comps, learn how to look at a neighborhood. You have to get a certain number of hours to become licensed. And I think that's 1,000 hours it was. And then maybe 1,500 to become certified. So, and then you've got there's a test. There's a test to be licensed, and then a test to be certified. So you have to pass the exam. and then you're either licensed or certified.
You also have to go through a fingerprint-based background check, a nationwide criminal background check that gets screened. So that's also a part of the requirements, and all of these requirements are set out by the Appraiser Qualifications Board, the AQB, which is one of the boards for the Appraisal Foundation. Again, it's this nationwide standard for getting a license. And so when Robin and I were working together, at the time, he was handling sometimes experience audits. So his job was to sample work product from people who'd been an appraiser trainee, and they were getting those, for lack of a better word, apprenticeship hours of experience. And then Robin was looking at one or two samples of the work product to make sure that it generally reflected that they had the practical know-how to actually do an appraisal that was compliant with the standards.
So, you kind of learn what to look for. And that was where a conversation with the applicant, the trainee, led to some very harsh discipline occurring through that process.
Yeah.
Yeah, Robin's talking about appraisal inspection fraud, really, that we sometimes encountered. Obviously, you have to be very careful when you're a regulator. You want to make sure you're not making assumptions and you actually have real evidence, because you got someone's career and livelihood in your hands. But sometimes we did actually find instances where people hadn't been forthright about who was doing the inspection that was being required by the lending institution, and come to find out, the brand new baby appraiser who's a trainee was the one doing it without any supervision from the supervisory appraiser, who's really the one that the lending company was expecting to have done that and required that to be done. So sometimes we did have audits that ended up turning into complaints because we were uncovering, pretty significant problems with that process.
And now that is as a like you said, Troy, what is the, not a pre-licensure, I can't think of the word for it. I guess an intern, right? What it is
It's
are
an
you an
appraiser
intern?
trainee is what they call them.
Trainee,
And
yes.
they're getting trained by the supervisor. And so, it's just like, if you wanted to hire a lawyer, you don't want to hire the brand new law student who's being trained by the lawyer. You want to hire the lawyer. And so if you agree and say, yes, I want to hire the lawyer, you expect the real lawyer to be there and be a part of the process. And then you come to find out, oh, in fact, that lawyer's never looked at my file a day in your life. My law student did all the work. That's kind of concerning. You're like, hey, I'm paying good money for a lawyer, not a law student. I don't mind having a law student be involved in the process, but I
Maybe not
certainly
the whole
expect
thing.
the
Yeah.
lawyer to be there working right beside them and making sure
Right.
done correctly. So we ran into that a few times. Yeah, it was rather sometimes rather dramatically when we would find instances where, oh, not only was this trainee doing it all on their own, but the supervisor was out of the country on vacation.
Oh, definitely weren't there.
Yeah.
Are there any other, and maybe that's not so common, but are there any common things that you see with applicants or appraiser trainees that may affect their application for licensure?
Well, I found that, and as it should be, an appraiser trainee is very loyal. And like I said, they should be very loyal to their supervisory appraiser. I mean, that's a person they meet with every day, hopefully. maybe spend a lot of time every day with that person. So if there is something going on that shouldn't be going on, they're very reluctant to be forthright about that, because they don't want to throw their supervisory appraiser under the bus. But again, at the same time as, you know, in enforcement, sometimes we had to make those hard decisions about, look, you know, you got to come clean with us. What's really going on? And so,
Well, and sometimes the appraiser trainee, since they're learning the process, they don't even necessarily know there's anything wrong. They are going through this process, and as they're learning, they're discovering, oh, maybe this person that was training me the wrong way, and I just didn't know.
Is there anything that you have seen most commonly get an appraiser in trouble? What are things that, you know, some appraisers may
yes,
not know that could land them in a bunch of trouble?
I've got a whole list here. So now would be a good time to maybe go through some of these, because these are things that I see when I'm consulting with people,
Yeah,
and they're asking for my help. Look, I've got this complaint, and I think if they'll pay attention to some of these things, not that I want to take away from my business or Troy's business, but it will help them not have to require our services. So if you don't mind, can I just go through some of these that
absolutely.
are very common, that I
Yeah,
see almost every time that I review somebody's appraisal report? First of all, if you're trying to, let me see the correct way to word this. If you want to lessen your chances of getting a complaint, don't accept the oddball assignment. And everybody knows what those are. I just reviewed an appraisal report that a gentleman in San Antonio had done. It was a $750,000 duplex in the middle of downtown San Antonio, and there was not much work to work with. There was no comps. You could do the cost approach, which he didn't even do. It was brand new construction. Why? He'd only been a certified appraiser for about 6 months. Why would you even want to take on that assignment? You probably don't have the competency, which is required, to accept that assignment. It's just most of these Fannie, not most, probably all of these Fannie Mae complaints I see are on oddball properties out in the middle of nowhere, a 3,000 square foot house on 100 acres out in the middle of nowhere. They are not going to fit Fannie Mae guidelines. They're just not. A real quick story. I assisted a gentleman who lives up in the Texas Panhandle. And he had 2 Fannie Mae complaints. And like this gentleman said, Robin, this is what I do for a living. I do all these hard, oddball assignments because nobody else wants to. Nobody else will do them. The bank knows that I will. And I said, okay, but you just got to realize that your chances of getting a complaint are going to be, he said, on the one, the bank actually told him, look, this is not going to go to a secondary lender. This is going to be kept in-house. Well, guess what? It got through their committee, and Fannie Mae picked it up, and they filed a complaint because the gentleman literally had to go 100 miles away to find comps, which is not, if you know that area, that's not at all unusual. It's just that they're not going to fit Fannie Mae guidelines. So if it were me, I would, especially early in my appraisal career, I would stick to the cookie cutter assignments, you know, where you can have 3 or 4 comps on the same street or a block away. You're not going to get in trouble on those. If you did, you got a problem, but your chances of getting a complaint are going to be a lot less on those than a more difficult assignment. That would be my first thing. If you have a situation occur where you've been asked to do maybe correct something in a report, or you have to come back and they want something else. Your client does. Make sure that the different iterations are consistent with each other. Again, I was assisting a gentleman that got a Fannie Mae complaint. He had 5 different iterations of the report. In one, he said that the property was had a residential view, and there was no issues. In the second report, he said it was in an adverse location. Well, it can't be both. Either it's, there's no issues, or there are. Which one is it? So you want to be careful. If you do have different iterations of an appraisal report, make sure they're consistent. I would highly encourage you to read the certification in the appraisal report. I think there's 25 items that an appraiser has to attest to. I have complied with all 25 items. Well, did you really? You need to read that and make sure that you have. That'll get you every time if you haven't. Make sure there's no misrepresentations in the report. If you say, I used the best comps, the closest comps to the subject property, there were no others, you need to make sure that that's a true statement, because people are going to check if you have a complaint. That's one of the things the investigator is going to look for.
I can remember more than one time Robin and I would be dealing with a case, and an appraiser would say something like, in order to figure out my cost approach, I utilized this particular cost publication manual, typically like a Marshall and Swift product. But then you would talk to them and you would find out, oh, actually, I just got some costs from builders, and I had left that in my report. It was kind of boilerplate and I didn't update it. And so now it wasn't anything intentional, but you have statements in your report that are not truthful and accurate, because you weren't paying attention to what you had in there.
Simone, another big item that I find is boilerplate comments in an appraisal report. Typically, appraisers will clone one appraisal report. If they're in a certain neighborhood, they'll clone it and use it for another appraisal report. Sometimes information gets conveyed that has no relevance to what you're appraising. So you want to be real careful using boilerplate commentary in your appraisal reports. The big thing, one of the big complaints that Fannie likes to, one of their big items is lack of support for your adjustments. If you have $100,000 location adjustment or quality of construction adjustment, you need to have a really, really good work. It needs to be in the report, actually, how and why you arrived at that $100,000 adjustment. At least be in your work file. Because, again, the regulator is going to want to know, they're going to want to know, where'd you come up with that adjustment? What was your rationale? What was your analysis of how you came up with that adjustment? I would like to see appraisers develop a working knowledge of USPAP. The 7-hour every 2-year update of USPAP that you take online. That's just not going to get you where you want to go. I'm not saying that you've got to be an AQB certified USPAP instructor, but you need to have a working knowledge of what's required. What am I supposed to be doing? What are you supposed to be doing? And the last thing, if it were me, and I can give you a story about this that I'm sure Troy will remember, you need to get off social media. That is because if a regulator finds out, an investigator finds out that you inspected a property, or you you allege that you inspected a property on a certain date, but there's a picture of you on social media on a cruise on that date. It's kind of hard to be at the property in, wherever while you're out on a cruise, or you're skiing, or you're in Washington, D.C., wherever you are. You can look at the date on the appraisal report and correlate that with the date that you're out doing whatever. And I just think it'd be best to get off social media, which is what nobody's going to do or nobody's going to like. But that's another issue that could be a problem for you if you get a major complaint. Less than 2% of appraisers get complaints, and that's something you can't control. You really can't control. You can't control a homeowner being upset with you because they think their house is worth $700,000 and you only came in at $690,000, and they're going to file a complaint. I mean, you just can't control that. But yes, I do want to make that point. 98 to even more than that % of the appraisers are doing the right thing out there. But just like any other profession, nurses, doctors, lawyers, whatever, there's always going to be a couple of the bad apples out there. So that's what they're in the business for, is protecting the consumers from the bad apples.
Well, Mr. Forrester, thank you very much for coming and spending your afternoon with us and giving us some great knowledge. Thanks for sharing your stories with us too. I know that our viewers are hopefully going to brush up on their USPAP and their USPAP knowledge.
You would hope, but
And and hopefully they listen to what you had to say about some tips and tricks, some things that you would like to see appraisers doing better, some best practices.
Yeah,
that's
thank
what
you
it's
so
all
much.
about.
Thank you so much, Robin, for sharing some of your insight and wisdom. I know it was always an interesting experience working with you at the board because we never knew what was going to pop up in the newest complaint, the newest file we got. But I think there's definitely a lot of lessons learned that you shared with our viewers here today that can really help keep you out of trouble, and knowing that these are the types of things to watch out for and these are the types of things to avoid. Because like you said, even if at the end of the day the complaint gets dismissed, you'd hate to have to go through that whole process. If you can avoid it, if you can change, kind of be more proactive and be more aware of how your regulator operates and how the board and the investigation process works. It just makes your life easier, and you don't have to come visit me or visit Robin and get legal or expert advice.
Yeah, and I just want to say that, you really can't help getting a complaint, and you shouldn't. Don't go through every day, every appraisal assignment, thinking, "Oh man, it's got to be perfect, or I'm going to get a complaint." You don't want to have a career like that. That's miserable. But it is good to know that like Troy's available if you do get a complaint, or myself, that there is help. Where it does help to have somebody on your side, whether you choose to fight it yourself, and fight is probably not the right word, but to pursue the process yourself, or get expert help. So there is help out there if you want that.
Well, Robin, thanks so much for taking some time and talking to our viewers. I mean, really, the point of our podcast is to get people more aware of their regulator. And you obviously spent a little over 10 years being a regulatory investigator. And so I think your insights and your feedback to appraisers is really important, so they can know what to watch out for and hopefully stay proactive and not get a complaint.
Thanks for having me on.
Empower your professional journey. Know your regulator, the podcast that inspires you to engage.